Welcome. This is Hashtag Gen Z, a podcast that explores Generation Z, who they are, how they're different from other generations, while also being an incredible blend of those who came before them. We explore what they think is cool, what moves them, and why they do what they do. I'm your host, Megan Grace, and it's so nice to have you here. As we continue to explore Gen Z in the workplace, let's take a stop to focus on an important developmental phase in careers, internships and early career roles. Whether it's an internship or a first job after graduation, the early career phase is critical to how people plan and navigate their time in the workforce. For those who have positive experiences, it can be a jumping off point into bigger roles or opportunities. For those who have negative experiences, it can sour them to a company or even an entire industry. Either way, the early career days are a profound learning environment, and companies and leaders should be paying attention to this phase of the professional journey. In a recent intern pulse study, KPMG found that 1 in 3 Gen Z interns plans to stay with their first employer and their first job for 5 years, which bucks the preconceived notion that younger generations are not loyal to their employers. Like most other generations, it seems like Gen Z is willing to be loyal if the working environment aligns with what they're looking for. Luckily, our guest today is here to tell us more about how companies and organizations can better manage career talent and keep them engaged. In this episode, I'm joined by Parker Pell, the co-founder of Abode. Parker has a background in campus recruiting and understanding Gen Z through research and presentations. He focuses on bridging the gap between the next generation being recruited and employers by bringing talent through his work in candidate engagement, program management, and conversion best practices. I'm excited for this episode. I'm excited for every episode, as you know. Anytime I get to make new friends and talk about one of my favorite topics, it's a good day. And that is certainly what we're going to be doing today. I'm excited to welcome Parker Pell to the conversation. Parker, welcome.
Thanks, Megan. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, Parker, tell us a little bit more about who you are. Give us a bit about your story. Who are you? What's your role? And more, I think we're interested in the journey that you took to the role that you're working in right now.
Yeah, so my story, currently I'm a co-founder at a company called Abode, which we'll dive into a bit later, but I'm based out of Montgomery, Alabama. Me, my wife, and our dog, Nala, who we love very dearly. And funny enough, I was at one point in time an intern for a couple companies who had an experience that didn't really meet up to my expectations, I'll say. And come to find out, a lot of my friends had these similar experiences. And that was the intuition for me and my roommates to start our company Abode. I'm super passionate about Gen Z. I am the oldest Gen Z. So literally the oldest, the last year that you can be Gen Z, that is me. And I take a lot of pride in trying to ensure and understand kind of what our generation, the generation that's going to make up 30% of the workforce by 2030, is really invested in and cares about when they're looking at their first career. So I spend a whole lot of time talking to fellow Gen Z individuals about their career paths, internships, job search, you name it, anything. I've probably had a conversation around that, and obviously have led us to the conversation today. So that's a bit about myself, my story, and just kind of where my passions lie.
I think it's so great that you and your roommates have taken what, I don't want to say were negative experiences, but maybe less than ideal experiences, because so many people would take a less than ideal experience, whether it's an internship or a job or just anything, and said, that wasn't ideal and I'm not going to do anything to improve it. And I think that's really cool that you all are taking the energy from less than ideal situations and hopefully creating better situations for people that come after you, which is really a good launching off point into let's talk about Abode. What is your passion, your baby, if you will, right now? What is the company? How did it come to be? And I know that you all have a focus on early career talent, and why that group specifically.
Yeah, so I'll give a quick introduction to Abode, but I think our story is kind of really sheds light into kind of the company as a whole and why the company does what we do today. So Abode is a software platform, a B2B company where we support early career talent programs to meet the expectations of Gen Z in their internship experience. So, what does that entail, right? And Megan, I don't know, were you an intern at one point in time in your college
I
career?
was. I was.
Okay.
I did. I interned with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation of Orange County. I always like to shout them out because they do great work.
Okay, awesome. So myself included, right? But campus recruiting, you get to school, you're all excited to see your friends, and then career fairs come up, and you're like, oh gosh, I need to go and like get a job or an internship. And so we, this goes into our founding story. Me and my two other co-founders, we did the traditional campus recruiting route, attending career fairs, getting job offers, signing that job offer, that first internship that I still remember with Atmos Energy down in Dallas, Texas, in 2017. We signed that internship offer, and you're so excited. You tell your parents, your friends, everything, like, I've got a job this next summer. And then you go back to school and you're kind of waiting, right? There's this gap between when you sign that offer as an intern and when you can actually start at that employer, which is not traditional in like traditional hiring experiences where you might have 2 weeks between signing an offer and starting. Um, and during that time period, right, there's a lot of anxiety that can build up of like, have I done everything I need to do for this upcoming job? Who in the world am I going to be working with at this internship? Some interns are relocating to cities they've never lived in. Where in the world should I live in, right? And a lot of questions that come up during this time. And companies today, like if they're not using Abode, will send emails. Megan, I don't know about you, but email when I was in college, I didn't really use email. Like I didn't know the importance of like using email in college. And so a lot of communications that I was getting sent from my employer were going to my spam email. I had no idea, right? Like I just thought like it was, I just wasn't hearing from them. And so that was kind of the intuition of shared experiences between the three of our co-founders at Abode is kind of during this gap after I sign that offer and before I start as an early in career individual, like, could there be a way for a company to connect me with my fellow interns or my fellow like program participants, right? Share with me information as often as I wanted it to, in a better way that was more seamless. And so we took that entrepreneurial spirit, I'll say, and we graduated from college in 2019 and launched kind of the first version of Abode, which really was a consulting firm where we helped campus recruiting teams to really ensure that their messaging was resonating with the generation of Gen Z being recruited, because that's what we knew. We were 21, 22 at the time. And in that process over 2 years, learned that companies did care about the candidate experience for their interns after they signed those offers, but didn't have a good way to ensure that they were meeting those expectations of Gen Z in a way that was able to be done by the company themselves. And so now you have Abode, where companies are able to ensure that there's consistent communication and engagement, a place for mentorship and connection, all of the things, right, that when you sign that first internship offer, you're really looking for, that's going to leave you with a lasting impression of like what a career at that company could be. We have all of that in really kind of a one-stop shop approach. And I think the focus on early talent management is just because it was a shared experience. Like we were early talent not too long ago, right? And so we feel like we can really have an impactful voice and influence on the companies that we work with and the experiences that they're delivering and what that will do for their interns, right? For their interns' careers and experience with that employer overall. So that's a lot.
I think
Yeah.
no, that's wonderful. I think that it's great that I think a lot of people get this early career or early talent phase wrong. Not that like I'm be like companies, you're doing everything wrong. But the mindset around it of yes, they might not be there for a long time, but they could be there for a time that is pivotal for them to become ambassadors for that organization or not, right? A good internship and a bad internship can be make or break on if a person even wants to buy consumer products from that organization again. recommend a friend to go work there, or potentially boomerang back to that organization. And so I've always been able to, I've been able to work with some really amazing interns, and some of them I'm like, I wish I could keep you on forever, right? Like, we just don't have the role right now. And I wish that more people are taking the approach that you all are, of helping realize that that intern group is not just get your college credits or whatever you need for school and get out of here. It is so important, and such an important, I think, phase of life for the interns or the early talent professionals as well. I think you could even apply that to first jobs that many people have had. My first job, my first big kid job, was one of the most important launching points of my career, and I just didn't know it at the time. But I love that what you all are doing. Because, what I heard is that there's some things that are going to transcend generations around an internship or a new job in your early days. And that's how to start the job, who to talk to, what mentorship, what connections do I need, and some of the basic logistic stuff of probably filling out forms, but also how to navigate, if you have to make a move for a job, that can create a lot of stress. And I think in past generations, it's just been you don't know what you don't know until you learn it on your own. And that dissonance can be really frustrating, but we don't need to suffer, right? We don't need people to suffer through that dissonance. And so I'm excited to continue to learn more about how you all are solving that problem. But I do know that Abode recently did some research on Gen Z. I'm sure you're always kind of researching Gen Z as one of your target end users. Mm-hmm. What are some of the findings from that research that you think people need to be paying attention to about Gen Z?
Yeah, I love this question, by the way, because it really influences the work that our team does every single day, and how we advocate to our partners, kind of how they are delivering an internship experience that's really meeting that Gen Z's expectation, right? There are a few key, we like to call them tenets to Gen Z that we like to discuss: transparency, respect, and connection. So we can break those three down pretty seamlessly and translate them to how companies should be catering and evolving what their processes are to this generation, right? So transparency, we all know what it means to be transparent, but that transparency doesn't stop at that first interview that you have with a recruiter, right? That transparency, Gen Z is looking for that to transcend into their mentor, their buddy, their hiring manager, the description of a event when they're working for you that tells them if it's mandatory or optional. All of these different workings of experiences an intern has or an early career professional has when they join an organization, kind of wanting that transparency to be up front and center, right? Nothing hidden, nothing assumed that they know, right? Take that as assumption, put it to the side, and then be overly communicative with expectations, right? Respect. I think that there is a stigma sometimes around who Gen Z is, and that they don't think that there needs to be professional etiquette, and they want to work whenever, wherever they want. And I think we like to think of respect as respecting differences in generations and being open-minded to those thought processes. But at the same time, respect is a two-way street. And so being able to set that foundation for the relationship in the workplace to go as long as possible and go for as long as the company wants. For example, if you're working a job in a industry where traditionally you're expected to wear a suit and tie, whatever that industry might be, right? You probably aren't going to be able to walk into that industry and just wear shorts and a t-shirt. But you can understand, and the company can let you know, hey, here's when it is acceptable to be more casual versus when you do need to be formal. One example that I heard recently that goes into that. And then last one is connection. So connection, in Megan, I'm sure when you are going and you sign that offer for your first job, the first thing that pops in my head is I wonder if anyone else at my school is going to work at this company, right? Maybe, especially if you're at a big school, you never know. So that connection with one another, right? Obviously, I want to know my manager, who I'm working for, right? But at the same time, like that connection with each other is what is going to really drive innovation, growth, and uh, a better career overall at the company. And so, connection in that, how can a company foster community based on ideas, based on locations, whatever that connection and community, however it works best. Taking that into account in all of the processes of this kind of early in career professionals experience with that organization. And then lastly, what I'd love to talk about is just kind of like work-life balance. And when I say work-life balance, I like to think about, and what we see in Gen Z is this work-life balance kind of thinks about it from like an autonomy standpoint. It's not that, hey, I don't want to work 40 hours a week. It's, hey, can I have the autonomy to be able to communicate? Here's when I'm going to work, and here's when I work best versus here's when I don't work my best. And I learned that about myself. Can I communicate that and have that autonomy to have that conversation in transparency with my hiring manager, and in return get respect and an answer of like, hey, this will work, this won't work, from there. So that's a couple of the kind of key things I think that we like to think about, and our research shows us, and is really kind of opinions that we like to also communicate with our partners as well, right? Who are the companies that are influencing Gen Z and bringing in all these great interns into their organizations.
I think that anytime you can break something down into 3 things, people remember it, right? So I think that that's something that many people can hear and understand, and that does, it transcends different industries as well, right? So it's not like the people in the medical industry versus, let's just say, facilities aren't going to look at that and say, yeah, those are kind of some things that young people, regardless of the type of work they're doing, are probably going to want from that, from the working environment. Now, let's say that you had the ears of HR professionals, which I know that you do in your work, but I know we've got some that might be listening, or at least people that can influence HR policies or the working environments of others. What advice would you have for those professionals when it comes to better engaging Gen Z and that early career talent group?
I'll go to 3 things again that I wrote down before that I think will really kind of are tenets that we advocate for. One is leveraging technology in all the aspects of the work that these individuals are going to be doing. From the time that they meet someone from your company at a potential and describe or discuss a potential opportunity until the day they are 10 to 15 years into your organization and into their career, how can you leverage technology and enable Gen Z with technology to learn, grow, and develop, right? So I think one is leveraging technology in every facet possible because of who Gen Z is. And Megan, I mean, I grew up with an iPhone since I was 12, I've always used technology to help me in my day to day. So one, I would say, is leveraging technology as much as possible. Secondly, is really focusing on life outside of your work. So obviously it's focusing and talking about all of the work that you can do at that organization, but how does the company foster a culture of being able to do your hobbies, get involved in a community? What are the ways that the company is really kind of empowering their employees to be involved in their communities, in kind of have a life outside of their professional life that they can get engaged with, right? This can be as simple as providing, obviously, like hours for volunteerism, which I think is an awesome one that we hear is a super big draw for a lot of Gen Z when they're evaluating internship opportunities. And then the third one I would say is just personalizing as many components of the experience as possible. If you get a blanket email that looks like there was some logic in there that says, "Hi, Parker, comma, dash," that doesn't show me that it was something that was shared directly to me. Personalizing communication as much as you can to Gen Z in a way that obviously is scalable for your team will only go the farthest way possible, because if we know one thing about this generation, they talk to one another and they talk about the experiences they loved. They talk about the experiences they didn't love. So any way that you can personalize any component of that candidate experience will only go farther for your brand.
Wonderful. Now let's flip it on its head, because there's plenty. I'm sure there's plenty of work that organizations can do to better engage Gen Z, and many are just starting to scratch the surface as more and more Gen Z are entering the workforce, and especially moving beyond that early career talent space. But there's still plenty of members of Gen Z that are taking those first steps in their career, and I would love to hear from you any advice that you would have for those early career seekers, job seekers, or potentially those that are looking at their first internships, and helping them navigate those first steps in their job search and career.
I would say one is try to intentionally network as much as you can. So what I mean by that is the school that you're going to have an alumni network where you can find and reach out to a potential mentor. So network intentionally. In the city that you're in, are there groups or associations of an industry that you're interested in that you could join, or maybe that your school is a part of, right? That you could go in and join. So networking intentionally would be a really big one for me. I think another one that I like to reference is trying to be as proactive as possible in building different skills. So even if you are a specific major, you think you have your career path fully set, are there ways that you could develop skills that might not be as common in that specific career track that you think that you want to go into, but showcase a brevity of interest in a lot of different topics? So proactively trying to build skills. I mean, right now, hot topic, like, could you take a 3-hour course on Gen AI and how to leverage that in the workplace, and think about what that could do for you and going into an interview? If someone says, like, talk about one thing that you recently did that really impacted you. Just one example, right? Kind of building and proactively building skills as much as possible. And then 3, I would say listen. I myself am still working on my listening skills, right? I think that listening, taking a step back to listen, is something that I always like to advocate, because I do think the generation of Gen Z is one of the more outward and vocal, having social media, right? Everything that you think you put out there. Taking a step back and listening for whatever that you're doing is another key piece that I would say is only going to help you in whatever it is, your career search, your school, you name it.
That's great. I think that there's a lot of pressure, like I don't know where the pressure comes from for interns and for those early career professionals, that they have to know everything. And I think, well, if I can toss one in there, is like, it's okay to ask for help. Like, it is absolutely okay to ask for help. And even if you're a decade or 2 decades into your career, people ask for help. And there's no better time to ask for help and mentorship than in those early days of a career. And so I think what you've shared is such important steps that people can take, right? I love the idea of being intentional with networking. I think networking sometimes gets like a negative connotation of being smarmy or salesy, when it's amazing the community of people that you can build if you're just intentional about it, or you're not seeking a transaction out of it. I've found that I've met people along the way that I met one time, didn't talk to them for 3 years, we didn't have any form of transaction, and they come back around one day and they're like, hey, I was thinking about you and this might be a good opportunity for you. And so I think that intentional and authentic networking can be so powerful. Well, Parker, this has been just really enlightening, right? I think that oftentimes the internship is dreaded, it's overlooked, it is seen as just like a necessary stop along the way, and a lot of people might see it as pointless. And I'm glad that you all are doing some work to counteract that narrative around what the internship is and what it could be, right? Like, there's such a great opportunity there. Now, I wrap up every episode with a question that I think is so important. And you are a member of this generation, so you'll be able to speak very, very close to the heart about this one. But what is one of your favorite things about Gen Z and some of your Gen Z peers?
I think one of my favorite things about Gen Z is this generation's ability to influence. I think that there are a lot of conversations about Gen Z and what they can bring to the workforce. But I also think with that comes a lot of interesting opportunity for influence in changing the ways that the old guard has done things for as long as possible. And I think that opportunity to influence is something that this generation will take advantage of, and I think it'll only go farther in growing every aspect of life, work life, personal life, you name it. So I'd say that's my favorite thing about Gen Z.
I can agree with you. I do think that they have an ability to have a lot of passion for something and then find other people that also have a similar passion to create movements. I think it is something that's truly fascinating with this generation. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how that energy translates into the career space and evolving the workplace. I know that there's already ways in which they're starting to do that, and it'll be quite interesting when there's a greater majority of them within the workplace. Well, Parker, this has been so interesting and so helpful to learn with you. I know that people will probably want to continue to follow along with the work that you're doing and the work that Abode is doing. What are the best ways that people can follow along with you and the company?
Yeah, so for the company, it's abodehr.com, ABODEHR.com, and reach out to me on LinkedIn, Parker Pell. I'm on LinkedIn quite often, so connect with me, reach out. I'm always happy to have a conversation with anyone.
Wonderful. Parker, it's been great to have you here. Thank you again.
Thanks, Megan.
Another thank you to Parker. What a great way to take a less than ideal experience and channel it into creating better experiences for others. There are so many ways an internship or a first job can be a pivotal launching point for someone's career. Parker shared a few things companies who are looking to offer empowering internships and early career experiences can focus on. First, leverage technology to its fullest. It keeps people informed and connected. Next, acknowledge and foster life outside of work. Be sure to empower employees to have a life outside of the professional work that they do. And finally, personalize as many components of the internship or early career phase as possible. This could include communication or scaling experiences that align with personal interests. Parker also shared some great insights for Gen Zers who are navigating those early career stages of their jobs. First, intentionally network. This could possibly be through your university, alumni group, or city group. This can be a great way to build connections with people who have similar career interests. Also, be proactive as possible at building different skills. It's okay to learn and explore things that might not be directly related to the work that you're doing right now, but it could broaden your career track down the road. And listen and take a step back as an opportunity to learn. This is a great skill not only for the workplace, but in life outside of work. To follow along more with Parker's work, you can connect with him on LinkedIn, and you can learn more about Abode at abodehr.com. That's ABODEHR.com. And thank you for tuning into this episode. It's always a great day when we get to hang out like this. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribing is the best way to make sure you don't miss new episodes when they become available. And speaking of new episodes, if you have a suggestion for a topic or a guest I need to talk to, I now have a pitch form on my website. You can find it at meganmgrace.com/podcast. This episode was edited by Leah Kramer, the Gen Zer behind the scenes bringing this podcast to life. Shout out to Leah. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you again for stopping by. Let's continue this conversation, and we'll chat soon.